So hi everyone, Captain Diane Pollock here with No Limits Charters. If you've been following me lately on social media accounts, I've used popping corks a lot lately with the water temperatures cooling down some, and just wanted to give you a quick tip, quick rigging, if you will, for the popping corks that I happen to be using. If you've followed me so far in the last month and a half, I've used Zman minnowz in the Gold Rush color. And for our water clarity that we've had here on the First Coast in the last month and a half, that's been a very productive color for me. Water temperature has cooled down a little bit. The top water bite slacked off some with the water temps getting cooler, and we've had some really breezy conditions here lately too on the First Coast. Quickly, what I do typically with my popping corks is just this one happens to be Cajun Thunder. It's very simple, so many different makes and manufacturers. I use, for my leader material, I like to use a fluorocarbon. And the fluorocarbon I happen to use right now lately has been the Yozuri 25-pound test, just because floating it over the oyster beds, if you get snagged, it's not such a big deal about breaking your line. A lot of times it'll hold up. And if a fish runs you against the dock piling or the oyster beds, deep into that, it holds up quite well, or it has in my past experiences with it thus far. I've been very pleased with it. What I usually like to do is take about 1.5 feet of leader, the fluorocarbon, tie it to the bottom of the popping cork, and I use lately, because in our area we have a very strong current and very strong tide system. Sometimes when you use the lighter jig weights, if the tide is slack tide with not much movement, then you can get the lure to soft plastic to sink better down to the bottom where you'd want to have it. But for me around here and fishing close to the sound itself, the tide flow, it gets really strong pretty much the whole swing. Our slack tide really doesn't last that long here. As a result, what I've been using is the jig head. That's a 3/8 ounce jig head. And the Z-Man that I've been having a lot of luck with, and it's been very productive for me here in this area, is the Gold Rush. And it's, as you can see, it's got a lot of gold flakes in it with a black soft plastic body. And what this does is, when you have it under the popping cork, you pop it, or I tend to work my popping corks much like I do a mirror lure, for instance, on the surface. A couple of pops and then let the cork settle. And when the cork settles, of course, you'll get that nice clicking noise, and it's resetting. Then you know it's all the way down on the bottom, or to the depth that you have the leader tied for. And that works pretty well for me. A couple of drops, and let it settle nicely. What I've been doing also lately is putting the Pro-Cure on the soft plastic, and this stuff really works. I've had a lot of people that's been critical or a little skeptic of the results, but for me it's always been a nice combo with the lures that I throw in this area. Shrimp scent's usually what I do use. Typically just put a little bit on the top, if you will, of the soft plastic, and that will give it a nice scent trail. And when you're popping these corks, the cadence for me is usually a couple of pops. And what that does is this pulls the lure up through the water column, and then when you're letting the cork reset, then the lure drops back down to the full depth of your leader. Many times the fish will strike once it's dropping back down, just before that cork settles all the way straight up and down. A common mistake that some people make, and I even make it, that can be a little frustrating. A couple weeks ago I even did it, went out for a quick dock walk, just really trying to get outside and unwind a little bit for the day. And the tide was ripping, and the oyster bed that I really wanted to hit was dead in front of me off the dock. And instead of taking the time and moving a little bit further out on the dock, where I could have the retrieve angle for the lure, like a 45-degree angle is typically, I didn't. And so I threw right in line with the current and the tide. And what happens when you do that, and it happens also with the mirror lures, If you're retrieving and working that lure with the tide, you have to retrieve some of your line before you jerk it the next couple times. And a lot of times the fish will strike during that pause phase in the cadence of working a lure. And if you're directly in line with the tide, then what happens is if that fish hits that lure, and by the time you get your slack cranked out of it, the lure itself has moved closer to you, and that can throw off your hook set. So if you're having problems with hook sets with these popping corks or other lures, jerk baits, the mirror lures, the top water surface lures, if you will, it's really important if you have no choice but to work that with the tide toward you, then you want to try to establish an angle from your target area or the zone. And that way, if the fish takes off or whatever, you have a little more time to get that line taut, and you won't lose the hook set, if you will. Really frustrating. Just something that easy can make a huge difference. If you can position your boat, it's a lot different. You can try to position your boat where you don't have to work those lures straight back to you or to the boat. For me, being on the dock, same thing. If you're fishing off a pier or dock or the shoreline, you want to, if you have a really rapid paced tide that's moving straight toward you, if you can help it, you really want to try to dodge retrieving that line straight back to you. If you can create an angle, it helps a lot with the hook sets in a ripping tide like we have here on the First Coast. I hope this tip can help you and you learn something from it. Look me up, get in touch with me. I'm always available, email as well. It's nolimitzcharters.com. You can find it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the YouTube channel as well. Hope all is well. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.